Jill Sisco is a president of the Acromegaly Community Incorporation, a patient organization that helps educate patients and loved ones regarding their rare disease and provides guidance on how to cope with their difficult illness. Since her diagnosis in 2005, Jill has been an influential advocate towards a better quality of life for acromegaly patients worldwide. In 2008, Jill became a leader in patient advocacy and has sat on several acromegaly advisory boards. Jill has presented with the patient's perspective to the FDA, co-authored several medical journal articles and abstracts regarding acromegaly, and manages the widely visited patient community website and social media support groups. By organizing and hosting the biannual International Acromegaly Community Conferences, which engages patients, specialists, and pharmaceutical companies. Jill shows how passionate she is about providing an emotional and communal support network for people touched by acromegaly. She works tirelessly to enable forward thinking that will facilitate research, assist patients with their treatment plans, and provide positive outcomes for the future of acromegaly patients everywhere. Jill is highly respected in her community and has been a pioneer in building awareness around acromegaly. Through her dedication, Jill leads by example and is a proponent of patients taking control of their lives and their disease and advocating for their best health possible. Please welcome Jill.
Okay, so just a little bit about Acromegaly Community. In 2008, Acromegaly Community was created as an online support group for patients to discuss their issues with other patients. We started actually with MySpace and then moved to the Facebook. In 2010, we received our 501c3 nonprofit by the US government. In 2011, we had our first patient conference. And, you know, I think at the first conference we had maybe 20 patients. It was a small conference, but it changed my life. Being in the same room where everyone understood what you were going through, I realized the value of being with other patients that understood. And not only that, but to empower myself with as much information as possible in order to help me live my best life with this condition. And currently we have 5 support groups in the US. I know Deanna has tried to kind of model the Canadian version with the US. We have our main support group that has around 3,200 members, which I don't say that lightly because we interview every single person before we allow them in. Whenever I was originally diagnosed in 2005, I went to MD Anderson for my pituitary surgery, and I had a few questions whenever I went home, and I went to what was supposed to be a protected site, and the first thing that I read was where someone had gotten on and said, "Big hands, big feet." Sounds like a bunch of big fuglies to me. And being a female with this condition, I cried for 2 days. I had just had pituitary surgery, and I'm sure I was on a hormonal, but it was horrible. And 2 days later, I got the courage to get back on, and the comment was still there. And I emailed the person that was in charge, and I said, "Could you please remove this? It's damaging." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes the crazies get by me." And I thought to myself, if I ever run a support group, the crazies aren't going to get by me and hurt the members the way that I was hurt. And so some people might think that it's overkill, but we do everything that we can to try to protect our members with their privacy and to give them a safe place to where they can discuss freely the issues that they're facing. But we have our main support group We have a women's-only discussion group. I learned very early that I didn't want to talk about loss of menses or facial hair in front of the guys. Sorry, guys. And we have a men's-only group where, they talk about testosterone issues or loss of libido that they don't want to talk about in front of the girls. We also have a family and loved ones group. We have a lot of members that, if a family member wants to join, we always ask the patient themselves, is it okay for this patient to be involved? And often the patient says no. And they say it's because they don't want their family member knowing how much they suffer. And so we have a family and loved ones group because family members need support also. But we don't allow any patients in that so that they get the support from other families that understand what it's like to live with this. And then we have a diet and fitness motivation group. I think that it's important to try to live our best lives, to stay active. And so we try to hit, every area that we can. In January 2021, we hosted a patient-focused drug development program with the FDA. And biannually, we host a conference in the U.S. Where we bring everybody together. In 2019, we combined with the Pituitary Society. And at that meeting, we had more than 500 endocrinologists in the room with a little more than 200 patients. And I'll never forget hearing the gasp whenever Dr. Melmed said, if you're an acromegaly patient, will you please stand up? And then looking around and seeing how many patients were there. And, together, we're stronger. And so, but we try to touch these areas that need to be touched. So I wanted to talk in the very beginning a little bit about the observed discordance between outcomes reported by acromegaly patients and their treating endocrinology medical providers. It's a study that we were involved in. There were 47 patients that were involved in this. And what happened was a survey company went out and surveyed the patient and the physician. They kind of had a two-way, they watched, and the differences of what the physician saw and what the patient reported. Because this really makes a difference about that we need to be precise when speaking to our medical providers. We need to also, if we can, take a calendar in with you, chart your symptoms, hand over proof regarding, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I had headaches. I had soft tissue swelling. I had this going on. You've got to show proof that these things are going on in order for your patient team to be effective in treating you. They can't read your minds. And so I wanted to go over some of these results. These are the demographics. We had 47 patients, 83% were female, and as we saw yesterday, most females talk more than men, so it doesn't. And they're also saying that I've seen recently that there's more females. I used to see that male and female were about 50-50. The last couple studies that I've seen, they're saying there's more females than males. So the median age was 49. The duration of acromegaly years to diagnosis were about 8.1. There were 47% that were on octreotide-based therapies, and it goes into which ones were on which dose. And then 53% were on lanreotide. There were patients on there that had combination. 17% had an octreotide-based therapy plus pegvisomant. 13% had an octreotide-based therapy plus cabergoline. It really goes through, and also if they've had pituitary surgery, 77% had pituitary surgery only. There were patients that had pituitary surgery and radiotherapy. So it really got good demographics for in looking at this study about the history of the patient. It also shows on here that the IGF-1 levels, 79% were within the normal range of these patients that were studied, and 21% was above the upper limits of normal. So reported by the patient, 72% reported headache, and it also reports mild, moderate, or severe, where only 62 of the medical providers recognized that their patients were having headaches, 62%. For fatigue, 77%, the patients reported fatigue. 92% of the medical providers recognized the patients were fatigued, so that's actually even higher. But sweating, 64% of the patients reported sweating. Only 40% was reported by the medical providers. Joint pain, 81% of patients reported the joint pain. Only 75% was reported by medical providers. Swelling, 79%, 51% by the medical providers. Carpal tunnel, 66%, 21% by the medical providers. Vision problems, 53%, only 11%. That's half of our patients in that study reported vision issues, and the medical providers only reported about 10% of that. Snoring, 60%. The medical providers reported 49%. Acrofog, which is a large thing with acromegaly, 81%, and the medical providers reported 51%. They also looked at the pattern of symptoms. You can see they really looked at the long term injections, where a lot of these issues happen right before the next injection cycle. So that's an issue. If you're having these issues, you might suggest getting your injections instead of 28 days, trying to bump it up to 21 days. I know for years I had to do mine every 21 days rather than every 28. And it makes a difference in the quality of life. What we're looking at here is trying to help patients live their best life, even though we're having to live with a disease. They ask about the frequency and severity of injection site reactions. You can see once again, the reported by patients is much higher than what was reported by the physicians. You need to take note of all these in order to live your best life. So one of the reasons why I'm talking about this is because, we focus on quality of life within our groups. And I presented what's called the AcroQOL. The AcroQOL is commonly used in clinical trials to our members. And we had, at the time, like 350 members that filled it out for us. And I was really shocked and dismayed at really how poor our quality of life is, even with treatment. And so I took this information from the AcroQOL and I went to the FDA because I knew that they had a program called Patient-Focused Drug Development. And I did a 9-page proposal about everything that I would do to try to make sure that they could understand and see what the journey truly is regarding being a patient with acromegaly. And so we brought together patients and caregivers and the pharmaceutical companies and the FDA all together in one to really examine and look at what it's like to be a patient. And so these were some of our findings. Within this meeting, we had 147 participants take part in this. And we had instant polling throughout the meeting. So we asked several questions, polling questions throughout it. And we also had patients from around the world talking about their different treatments, what their journey was like. We had patients on Zoom. We also had recorded messages from patients because, you know, it's not just about one, it's about everybody. And trying to, I know yesterday we saw about Dr. Asa, about the risk benefit, you know, and trying to, you know, improve. And so we really took a deep dive look at what the patient journey looks like. So in my opinion, this is one of the biggest findings from throughout that meeting. We, once again, we did demographics in order to try to see. We asked at which age did your first symptoms start to appear? And most commonly was 31 to 50 years of age, with almost half the people. 19 to 30 age, 37%, 50 to 60, 6%. And we did have a couple that were considered that they have gigantism within the group too, 8%. Then we ask, at what age were you diagnosed? As we know, the diagnostic delay truly does affect the patient. So that age, you know, it makes a big difference. 19 to 30, only 15%. 31 to 50, 59%. 51 to 60, 22%. And older than 63%. So we ask the patients, which of the following acromegaly-related health concerns do you currently have? And I'm just going to go over the top ones. Fatigue and weakness was the top. Enlarged hands and feet. Joint problems, arthritis, headaches. But I don't want to forget, you know, about soft tissue swelling, or anxiety and depression, because that's something that's not talked about very much within acromegaly. And, you know, the mental effects of this condition, I think, needs to be focused on more in order to help improve the quality of life of patients. And then we asked the 3 most troublesome acromegaly health-related concerns that they had. The number 1 was the joint problems, arthritis. Number 2, fatigue or muscle weakness. And number 3 was the anxiety and depression. You know, that's not discounting headaches and other items, but those were the top 3 that were the most troublesome for patients. And then we ask, what specific activities of daily life are most important to you that you are not able to do due to your acromegaly? And social interaction and participation was the number 1 complaint. And then exercising and participation in sports and recreational activities. You know, I somewhat think that most of the social interaction and participation could be due to the stigma that is somewhat put on to this condition. You know, we don't ask for our appearance to change. We don't ask for the acro rage that happens whenever growth hormone is high. There's just so many things within acromegaly. It literally hits us in every single aspect of our lives. And then we also ask, what specific activities of daily life are most important to you? I'm sorry, we ask, besides medications and treatments, what are you currently doing to try to help manage your acromegaly symptoms? Because, you know, throughout the years, we've learned that there are things that we can do to try to help ourselves regarding this condition. But we have to use that in combination with, you know, the available therapies out there. Healthy diet was number one. Years ago, I was at an endocrine society meeting, and whenever I first started this, I would talk to endocrinologists regarding diet, and they said, "Oh, your diet doesn't make any difference." But I tell you, and I said, I disagree. And because I would eat something, and within 30 minutes, I would get a headache, especially if it was sugary. And you know, now I've spoke to endocrinologists and such that have told me that, you know, patients that manage their diets better and try to stay away from things that cause glucose spikes, you know, they have seen drops by as many as 200 points in the IGF-1. Like I said, it's not just, you have to do it in combination. You can't stop your medical therapies, but you can do things to help yourself. They also increase exercise, stress management. Whenever you're stressed, your cortisol levels raise. Cortisol raises your blood sugars. It's all a feedback system. You know, if you can, you know, yoga or meditation, you know, doing things to help yourself will help improve your quality of life. So in my opinion, this is one of the biggest things that I wanted to come out of this meeting, because I hear it every day on our support groups. So we ask our people, do you consider yourself biochemically controlled? Is your number within the normal ranges for your age and gender? And 22% said always, 35% said most of the time, 19% said sometimes, and then rarely and never, 6% and 11%. So, but then we ask them, whoops, do you consider yourself symptomatically controlled? Well, that always dropped from 22% to 2%. Most of the time, 29%, sometimes 18%. So we have almost 50% of patients that say rarely to never. I tend to wonder personally if 100 years from now, they will have discovered better biomarkers to determine disease. Because I know many patients that are symptomatic that have been told that they're in remission, that, you know, and when you go to the doctor and they say, you're good, but you don't feel good. And it's you know, that's one of the downfalls of being an acromegaly patient. I think it's an Alanis Morissette song that says, doctor says you're cured, but you still feel the pain. And I think that all the patients in this room can relate to that, because we still have issues even if our numbers are within the normal range. So we need to do more to help ourselves. So, like I said, we have almost 50% of patients that feel that they are symptomatically controlled, rarely to never. We need to do more. Physicians need to focus more on the acromegaly burden of living with this disease, and patients need to speak more effectively and communicate the issues that they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Like I said, if you need to, take a calendar with you. Or Pfizer, and I don't know if it's available here in Canada, but in the US, they have something called the Acro Tracker that literally is an app that you can go on daily and rate your symptoms. And you can take it into your doctor, and you need to give proof that you're not doing well. So it's not just about those numbers. It's about our quality of life, and working together we can improve this. So I think that's it. Thank you.